Just tell them you were Llewellyn.
We're recording. We're recording now. We're recording. Welcome, everybody. It's July 12th. I can't believe that we're in the middle of summer. It's 98 degrees in glorious Austin, Texas, and not a cloud in the sky. And when you go outside, it feels like the sun is just melting you. We have a great guest today. Before we get going, we're going to ask our own John Sibley Butler for some music.
I've been down this road before. I remember every tree, every single blade of grass. Oh, the special meaning for me. And I remember everything in every hotel room and every song I ever sing on a guitar out of tune. And I can't forget the way you turned this the first night that we met. And I remember your own lovely eyes too. I miss you in the morning light, like the roses, Mr. Dew.
All right. John Butler, how are you, sir?
I am doing fine in the heat of Austin. I had a lobbyist from Washington come down, used to play for us, talk a little politics and talk a little fundraising. He's a lobbyist, used to work for the Republican Center of Wisconsin. And we spent the whole day talking, played a little golf in the morning to think about the election that's coming up. And then, of course, the heat is here. But what's really, really interesting to me is, I'm looking at the inflation rate. It looks like it's going down. I'm looking at the jobs created. It looks like it's stability. And then I'm looking at all of the East Coast is having its floods. And as we say in Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. So all of that comes together in an interesting kind of way, as usual, but more interesting this time. We are still coming off of the pandemic. I'm not talking about the biological nature of the pandemic. I'm talking about the social attitudes. I'm talking about the issues of work and residence. I'm talking about empty buildings being downtown. I'm talking about people quitting their six-figure jobs because they refuse to go into work. And in the midst of all of that, you have all of the creativity and all of the entrepreneurship that's absolutely going on. So at the end of the day, if you look at the movement of people in America, the demographic shifts that's happening, then of course they're moving to the South. Of course, Northerners don't say the South; they say the Sun Belt. So they're moving to the Sun Belt. And if you look at the number of jobs created by Texas, it's been absolutely amazing. And I think states like Alabama are also picking it up. So we have one of the biggest shifts in population. And as Llewellyn would tell you, not just in America, but around the world. It's kind of like we're in a situation to say we've had experiments in the last 100 years. We had experiments in market economies in America. We had an experiment in Russia, or the Soviet Union. After 60 years, it failed. And people are coming together to find out how to make it through the day. And then when you look at all of the other issues and the debates about global warming, and the one that's going to be really interesting would be the presidential elections this year. I think that the more Trump has problems, the stronger his base get. The more the news talk about him, the stronger the base get. So it might be very, very interesting to have a presidential candidate who's being indicted. But I think other than that, it's a good America. It's hot in Austin, but that's the way we like it in Austin. Hot during this time.
All right. Well said. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. I'm up here in New England, which has had some quite bad weather, although it's missed us in Rhode Island. We've had a lot of rain, but not enough for flooding, as is the case in Vermont and New Hampshire. And mostly we're glad of the rain because we have a huge surge in our farm productivity, etc., which happens until you get too much. Meanwhile, it seems to me to be utterly and indisputably clear that global warming has arrived. For 50 years, I've sat through conferences where it's been discussed, argued about, people have produced different statistics. Always there are statistics that favor your point of view. There were NASA statistics on warming, their measurements, which are a little more favorable than some other people's. I sat through these meetings at many universities like Columbia and Harvard. But the fact is that global warming is now here. It's indisputable. And it has been building essentially for a little over 100 years. The Industrial Revolution contributed very little to global warming because despite the extensive use of coal, it was a small blip compared with what started happening in the teens and 20s of the 20th century, when suddenly we had huge mobility with the internal combustion engine, and we had the vast deployment of electricity, all of which initially, or nearly all of it, can quibble about things like Niagara Falls, a hydro plant, but mostly it was coal-generated, coal-fired, and this continued with quite a lot of energy all the way up to the 90s, when we largely started moving from coal as the primary fuel to natural gas, also a fossil fuel, but a less dangerous one from a climatic point of view. It's here now, and it's going to do all sorts of things in the world. It's going to cause parts of the world to be close to uninhabitable. I'm looking with great interest at your state, at Texas, because we're beginning to believe that we may see a reversal in population trends moving into the Sun Belt and see people moving back, seeking colder or cooler climates. Real estate dealers around here are salivating at the prospect of people who have moved to Texas, made money, will come back and buy expensive homes. Things are changing, and nothing will change them more than climate. Johnny referred to the political situation, which is made very sad by the fact that we have heading the two parties in the coming presidential election, two men grossly unsuited for the job. One because he is reprehensible in almost every way, and the other because he is frankly too old and he is showing it. And yet we're heading with all the talent, with all the creativity, with all the marvelous ability of the US, we can only find these two stooges to represent us in the presidency, which is a peculiar American tragedy.
Well said, well said, well said. Well, we have a great guest today, the Honorable Trey Mendez. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Andres. Thanks. Good to see you again.
It's always a pleasure to see you, Mr. Mayor. You will always be to me the mayor who put Brownsville on the map. It's quite a journey that took place there, and you know, we're always excited to see. Now, before we get into our discussion, let me share my screen real quick and update everybody on what's happening on the grid. I love this ERCOT portal. So see, a few days ago, the peak was going to be 100,000 megawatts. Today is only going to peak at 91,670. So we are, you know, 1,000 megawatts below the last peak. So no big deal. It's an easy day for the grid. The reserves are almost 6,000 megawatts. Things are happening as normal. You know, the portal has all this information about the system-wide demand and the sources of generation and how the wind and the solar are doing. And you can see that solar and wind are, behaving reasonably well. Wind is doing a lot better today than it usually does. This other curve is traditionally another set of the wind generation, but the peak of solar helps when the peak of the demand is happening. So solar is just a great helper for the grid on any given date. And then look at the pricing. The pricing started at $20. It had a little blip all the way to $54 or $59, $63. And that's where we are right now at 32. And then there's a forecast that is going to take us all the way to 82 perhaps. And of course, we never know what's going to happen with the forecast. But if you sell generation, you forecast at 20, but if you can sell it at 87, that is 4 times the gains. And it's not a bad day for making electricity in Texas. So, Mr. Mayor, give us your thoughts on your departure from a phenomenal journey there, and where are you up to these days?
Well, thanks. I really kind of reflect on my almost 4 years of office in Brownsville, and I'm proud of the achievement. I think we accomplished quite a bit in those 4 years, especially considering the challenges. You had a global pandemic, first one in 100 years. Then we had the torrential freeze that really devastated our community for a few months. We were seeing the effects of that for a while. We had some other issues down here that were very pressing. We were dealing with a lot of immigration issues as well, and focusing some city resources on that. We really took that as an opportunity to build a national model in immigration, which we actually did. It became known as a Brownsville model. So the city of Brownsville did lead the way and was actually training other communities in how to handle migrant influxes and how to efficiently and humanely process individuals on border communities. So we did kind of build a national reputation on that. And overall, I think the proudest achievement for me certainly was the Broadband initiative. That for me is something that's going to create generational impact and something that we're going to see the effects of for generations and decades, really. And we got out ahead of it before the pandemic. A little bit of vision and a little bit of good fortune on the timing, because once we were out ahead of everybody, then everybody realized how valuable the internet actually was, and how it was an injustice that communities like ours weren't being connected, and how valuable a tool the internet was for not only economic development, which I put a big premium on, but also telehealth and education, certainly. So that's my biggest achievement, the one thing I'm proudest of. But then if you look at just the data, it speaks for itself. During my time, during the administration, we had just tremendous, unprecedented economic development. We went from about $150 million in construction and development per year when I came in 2019 to, as I left, about 450 million. So we tripled our economic development in that short time, which is huge. Really increased our tax assessments. Brought more money into the coffers. We're able to lower our tax rate and really spent more on capital improvements. We had the largest capital improvement fund ever in the city's history. So we allocated more money than anybody ever had for drainage and improvements. And I know for some citizens, even that still wasn't enough. I heard about it every day. During my time, the thing I heard about the most was the streets, the drainage, the potholes, and the trash. And it's a big picture thing for me. For me, that was just something that no matter what you do, you're gonna hear about potholes, drainage, and trash and things like that on a regular basis. That's just something that citizens see. It's kind of like if what they see in front of them is their most pressing issue. So I understand that. But on the big picture, on the big 10,000-foot view, we accomplished some major initiatives for the city of Brownsville. Also, as you know, AMI, which you've been a part of, Andres, AMI at our public utility, which is, we were one of the last probably municipally owned utilities in the whole entire state that didn't have any sort of AMI infrastructure. Getting that through and getting that approved was huge. And that, again, is something that's really going to pay dividends for decades. And I think at the time we did it, we were not only one of the few municipally owned that didn't have it, but I think only less than 10% of the whole entire state didn't have AMI infrastructure for their utilities. So smart meters, things like that. So yeah, bringing Brownsville from I guess the 1900s to 2023 was something I had to condense in a little bit under 4 years. I feel like I did that. And now I get to kind of see the fruits of the labor from the outside, and really just happy that I was able to serve during that time, do the things I was able to do. And now I get to be a lawyer again and do some work and hopefully make some money at some point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you again. Before I ask these guys to jump in on your public service and everything you've done there, you will definitely be recognized for a long time, or maybe forever, one of those majors that transform a town that had potentially in most people's mind a far away destination future. But you also don't give yourselves credit for landing SpaceX and all these things, but call it serendipitous, whatever you want to call it. It's only happening because of the location, the geography, the work that's being done there. So Brownsville is going to be an epic city come time.
Oh yeah, and we can't build houses, we can't build them fast enough. And SpaceX certainly, I mean, Elon knows well enough, probably one of the brightest engineers in the world too. I mean, he knows well enough the geographic position of Brownsville, how valuable it was. So back when that was happening several years ago, I really felt confident that Brownsville would be the place that they ultimately chose. And seeing the economic impact of SpaceX in Brownsville has been huge. And the numbers I mentioned earlier, Andres, the economic development numbers, that does not include SpaceX. Right. I mean, SpaceX during my term had several $100 million a year worth of economic output that it was producing in our region, which is huge. It produced, I believe, when I left, somewhere around 1,800 jobs, and the majority of those were local. Over 70% of those were local individuals that were working for SpaceX, and certainly a high-paying job. Really a meaningful job when you're looking at the ultimate goal of the company, not just what they're doing, what they aim to achieve, and then also serving as something that students and young people in our community can aspire to, not just seeing it on TV, but actually seeing it from their backyard. It is something that gives them hope and shows that the next generation of rocket achievements are happening just outside of Brownsville.
Yeah, and real quick again, before these guys jump in, as an anecdotal thing, when we started working with you guys in 2019, and smart cities projects and stuff like that, it was really fascinating to go into the hotels and bump into all these breakfast Tesla people. I mean, SpaceX people of all kinds. I mean, like all of a sudden, what's going on? It was, everything was busy. More and more. It's just fascinating to see that and to listen to all these conversations about rockets. You're having breakfast. It's fascinating.
Well, yeah, when you drive around Brownsville, you'll probably see more Teslas than just about any other city except Austin. I remember when we got our first superchargers in town, which is a little bit over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago. People made fun of me for announcing it because they said there's not even 8 Teslas in the whole entire city. And there actually was, but that kind of was something funny to me. But we have a Tesla distribution center as well, which is very busy, and that's been pretty cool to see as well.
Absolutely. Johnny?
Yes, man. Let me tell you something else that happened on your watch. I don't know if you knew this, but I am the head of the finance committee for the MIDI Foundation.
The MIDI Foundation, I never heard of them. Enlighten me a little bit.
And I went there. We did the MIDI Culture District, as you know.
Oh, it's fantastic.
We did the museum, and I played music, and I love Brownsville. It reminds me downtown of the French Quarters. And of course, as you know, we have purchased 2 buildings to bring education right there. And we hope that UTRGU will purchase those buildings so that right in the center of Brownsville, you will have a college. So we have worked there, and I've enjoyed going there. Let me ask you this: we see in this vastness that they call Texas, we see Brownsville as being the center of innovation technology going forward for the next 100 years. And that includes all the things that you have done so well. And I want to know how you view yourself in the region there. That is, the city, as you know, is not the unit of analysis per se. The unit of analysis would be the region. How do you view the whole valley and you taking the leadership in innovation, technology, and how are they responding to your leadership or the leadership of Brownsville?
Sure. Well, let me first say, I certainly know who the middies are. RJ's a friend of mine. Dana is obviously somebody that I talk to probably every couple of weeks. Usually have to put out some sort of fire with Dana, but she's great. She's great. Love her to death. And I always tell her that if I'm going to be in a street fight, she's the first person I'm going to choose to have my back. But RJ's been fantastic, just a great ambassador for the city of Brownsville. And the things the Midi family has done, and the Midi Foundation, certainly, John, with your leadership as well, has really changed our community and changed that corridor, that 7th Street corridor that y'all have really developed over the last couple of years. We're going to see that cannery project come online. And I know that y'all are about halfway through the park project, which is looking fantastic. And I knew about the building purchases. I was right in the thick of it, kind of from the sidelines, helping push it along. Behind the scenes, which really was an amazing thing. Getting those 2 buildings out of the hands of the individuals that had them, which they were basically not necessarily vacant, but they were in just falling apart, so to speak. And getting those 2 buildings into the inventory of the Midi Foundation, and now hopefully over to the university. I've seen those plans. I've been involved with them. And it's amazing. It's going to transform our downtown even more. I feel that that's going to be a huge accelerator to what we're already doing. You've seen private investment. You've seen probably tens of millions of dollars worth of private investment in our downtown over the last 3 or 4 years. Now with the Midi family investment, and then hopefully with the university investment, I know not just these 2 buildings, but a couple others. That's really going to be adding even more fuel to the fire of our downtown, and it's going to really supercharge the interest and kind of bring a different type of development and a different perspective to our downtown. Getting to the leadership, I'm going to be honest, I really feel that when I was mayor of Brownsville, I really put us in the conversation on a statewide level, but also in the conversation on a national level. Just some of the things we were doing, some of the initiatives I was able to lead at the city. And to be quite honest, John, I feel that the rest of the cities in the RGV, we were just lapping them. I just kind of felt like we were driving a Tesla Model S and everybody else was kind of still on the Fred Flintstone cars. But that's just a testament to our potential and unlocking that potential. And it's not a knock on the other cities. They just we were all moving, let's say, at the same speed. But then once I was able to come in and really set the vision, set the tone, set the pace, and get everybody believing and empowering our city folks and getting them to buy into the vision and getting them to buy into the innovation and the potential of it, we just supercharged that mindset and just really just accelerated. Like I said, I felt like we were kind of just running circles around a lot of other people in the region, but that kind of awakened them too, and that made them want to aspire and do some bigger and better things, and they have. There's been some great movement in other cities. There's fantastic leadership in the RGV now. Harlingen, the mayor that they have there, Mayor Sepulveda, is a great younger, dynamic mayor. Means well, has done some good things, really cares about her community. And we're seeing some other great leadership around the valley. And I feel that the region now is somewhat united in wanting to move the entire region forward. That doesn't mean that we can't have our own little niche. And I think as long as we move forward the way we're moving forward, there's definitely enough room for everybody to play and everybody to have a seat at the table. It's just everybody has their own kind of thing that they're working on. And I feel that it really kind of supercharged not just Brownsville, but also the whole entire region. And I'm just excited about the potential. Other people are seeing it now. And, I had a good 4 years. And like I said, now I get to kind of be involved in my own way from the outside, but really it was fun watching, and it's been fun watching it now that I've been away, watching it continue to unfold.
Very good, because what we're finding here, my favorite story in the last 2 months or so, Andreas and I was at a city that's an hour and a half drive from Austin, and the city manager said, quote, "We are now North Austin," and that was Killeen. So you see that when you begin to do stuff and you begin to be the model,
Right.
cities want to be like you. They want to be like New York. You know what I'm saying? They want to be like those cities that have been great gateway cities to America and have done great things. So I'm thinking that as Brownsville goes about its duty, then a lot of the cities we want to join and become a region in terms of transportation, smart infrastructure, fast trains, and those kind of things. So I envision, for example, Fredericksburg to Austin in the fast train, because the hill country is absolutely gorgeous. Well, thank you very much so far.
Yeah, definitely, John. And just one more thing too, before I forget. As a result of our broadband initiative, we really inspired other communities in the county now to start their own projects and really start to look at developing countywide broadband projects to connect the county and other underserved areas. And other communities in the RGV as well have really seen what we've done and gotten inspired by that, and are now either undertaking their own projects or looking into doing projects like that, which, if we can bridge the digital divide in Brownsville, Texas, which is one of the least connected communities in the country, that is the model for other communities to do it as well.
Yeah, and one more thing, when I was there, I was working with my good friend Herb Kelleher to get a direct flight with Southwest Airlines from Dallas and Houston. I don't know if you're still pursuing that, but I do know most of the people on that on the Southwest Airlines board. But that was one of my favorite things to do with Brownsville, to get direct flights on Southwest Airlines.
Well, I would still love to do that. I know that was always kind of an aspiration of ours, is to try and get Southwest to start doing business in Brownsville again. I don't know if you know, John, but the original story was that Brownsville had that opportunity in the 70s, and it's still it's still something that people talk about as a missed opportunity, right? And that's kind of always the example of a missed opportunity for our community, because we had the opportunity to have a Southwest. I'm not even sure, it may have even been their entire hub of operations down in Brownsville. They chose to continue with Braniff, which at the time in the early 80s was certainly a leader. Late 70s, early 80s, before they went bankrupt in 82. And I know that because my dad actually worked for Braniff. But at the time, the community saw Southwest maybe as a risk, as a startup. Hindsight being what it is, obviously wish they would have made that decision. But I've always kind of wanted to bring Southwest back into the conversation. We weren't able to do that while I served, but right before I left, we were able to bring 2 direct flights to the city through another airline, Avelo, which is a spinoff from the same individuals that founded Allegiant. So it's a brand new company. It's maybe been around for about 3 years. They have a new fleet of 737s. So they're doing direct flights from Brownsville to Orlando and Brownsville to LA. And then just a couple of weeks ago announced a new flight, Brownsville to Las Vegas.
Because remember that your airport there is very historical. It's where Amelia Earhart lights took off. It was seen as the airport to South America.
Yes.
And I think that by now, exactly Southwest, that was a pretty interesting decision. And I do remember that. But also I remember that in the old days, Brownsville was where it was one of the centers for airplanes that serviced South America. So the airport there, I've been there, it has a great museum. And it's just fabulous. So you get it back. Don't worry.
Absolutely. And I kind of I really saw an opportunity there too, John, as us being that connection for Latin America. I felt that we had a great opportunity to be that kind of transportational hub for Latin America, Mexico, Central America, South America. That was a lost opportunity, but I really, we did have a slogan back in the day. It was called Crossroads of the Hemisphere. That was one term or one slogan that was used to refer to Brownsville. We were at that time the crossroads of the hemisphere. And the first international mail flight took place in Brownsville, and it was flown by a pilot. You may have heard of him, a guy named Charles Lindbergh.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the museum. It's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating airport. The old airport there that served all
Yes,
of that.
the Pan American building's still there. Mhm.
Yes, the Pan American building is still there.
All right, Llewellyn.
Well, yes, I find this very interesting about Brownsville because it would seem to me that it's a great social cauldron. For one thing, you have a largely Hispanic population, the settled population. You have an influx of a huge number of Anglos brought in by the development, and particularly by Elon Musk's activities. How is that working? Is it producing tensions, particularly over housing, schools? And how is that integration going? Secondly, what do you think can be done with immigrants? We have a terrible shortage in this country, say, of electricians. In fact, it's true of almost every trade. There's a shortage. Should we somehow be mining the illegals and finding the talent we need there rather than locking them up or putting them in camps where they're non-productive and forbidding them to work? Brownsville must know a lot, and you said it yourself earlier, about the sensible and intelligent and humane treatment of illegals. So you've got, it's something of a laboratory of a city at the moment. You've got it adjusting to huge growth, but also to new kind of population coming in, if I might say so, at a better economic level than the people living there. And what is this doing to pressure on water, pressure on sewage, the civil provisions, and health and education, of course?
Well, sure. That's a great question, Llewellyn. And I mean, first on the socioeconomics, Brownsville traditionally was a European city. When it was founded in the mid 1800s, 1848 specifically, it was a mix of a lot of European settlers, predominantly Spanish, French, and English. So Brownsville really was a very diverse city. Upon its founding, it was founded by a gentleman named Charles Stillman, who his descendants later went on to found a bank, the City Bank of New York, which is now Citibank. So you know, we were a very diverse community when we first started, and then being where we are located geographically, especially after the Civil War and at the turn of the century, we did start to see a lot more Hispanic heritage and Hispanic influence in Brownsville. And now we see the population being over 90% Hispanic. But the socioeconomics are changing, like you mentioned, because we've seen an influx of on two fronts, an influx from several neighbors to the south, which is a variation of asylum seekers and several, I think when I left office, we had seen somewhere around 150,000 individuals come through our port of entry, heading to different places in the US. So we received and efficiently managed over 150,000 people that were seeking asylum or coming to our country for whatever reason that they were coming, whether it was economic, political, or any other reason. But we also have seen an influx of individuals with our bigger industry, specifically SpaceX. So we have seen that SpaceX does import a lot of the higher end technical individuals, engineers. We have seen a lot of engineers that are coming into our community. And to be quite honest, it has not affected any of our infrastructure. It hasn't really affected anything. It's only kind of opened our eyes up to the fact that we need to continue to build out our infrastructure. We're always trying to do that in a very intelligent way and trying to prevent urban sprawl as much as possible and trying to activate certain areas of our community that weren't as dense and trying to create some better density and smart density in certain areas. But it hasn't taxed our resources at all. We are investing more in infrastructure. We were doing that as I was leaving office in preparation of not only the arrival of several more individuals into our community, but also in anticipation of other industry and other job creation that's on the horizon that we're anticipating coming online here in the next several years. So overall, it's been positive, handled very well. And in regards to the migrants and the immigrants that are coming through our city, I feel that, like you mentioned, those individuals can certainly be a benefit to our whole entire country if we find a smart solution and a better solution to managing the individuals that are coming. I was always a supporter, not only a comprehensive immigration policy that'll eventually hopefully happen at Congress, but specifically, I felt that the most valuable thing that could be done short term was, for the US at least, was to get those individuals working as quickly as possible. Right now, I believe that there's about a 6-month waiting period in order for somebody to actually be able to begin work. While they're doing that, they're certainly not able to contribute to the economy. They're living either off of our economy or the help of others, or the generosity of others. But I felt that if you could get those individuals, a lot of these individuals, if you look at the stats, a lot of these individuals that are coming are young men that are healthy, strong, and able to work and want to work. So if you can get them into the system quicker, I'm talking 30 days, 60 at the longest, get them into the system, that solves a lot of workforce needs. It solves a lot of skilled labor needs. And then it also gets them paying into the system and hopefully on a path to citizenship. But overall, that is something that's been lost in Washington through bickering, infighting, and politicizing of the situation, unfortunately. But if that can be done, I think it'll help our economy in several ways. It reduces the total money that we've spent on housing, providing for some of these individuals that are coming, but also gets them into the workforce, which solves a lot of small business needs and gets them paying into the system, which creates additional revenue for the country. So I think it's a win-win-win if it can just find the support where it really needs to find the support, and that's in Washington.
That's
Yeah,
one question here, and that is about the schools. I know for a long time in Northern Virginia, the states that really, or the regions, because the states is a very large, Virginia is a very large state, but the counties that prospered were those that really emphasized their educational system. Fairfax County in Virginia, Montgomery County in Maryland, and got richer and richer and richer, and the schools got better and better. And so this became a self-fulfilling reality, that when you got the high-tech people in, you got better schools. When the counties realized that the way to attract and keep the high-tech people were with better public schools, they improved their public schools. And both Fairfax and Montgomery across the river in Maryland are now really magnet communities for people, educated, technical people who want their kids to go to really good state schools.
Yeah. Let me add to Llewellyn's. You know, if you look at America and how it developed, we call them gateway cities. The social science and sociologists call them gateway cities. New York is a gateway city. Miami is a gateway city. San Francisco is a gateway city. And gateway cities have always done well because there's always creativity coming from other places. We can look at New York City in the push carts in the 1800s. Let's add innovation and entrepreneurship to that formula. So I can envision not only them coming to work, but I can envision them starting their own enterprises. I can envision them adding to the economy through an innovation and entrepreneurship. We have not looked at Brownsville in the same way that we look at New York City and San Francisco and Miami. And let me remind you, for those who are not alive, that in the 1960s, Miami was a dying city. Everybody was calling to Washington to help them out. And all of a sudden, Castro said, there will be a new Havana. But that new Havana was Miami, because all of the entrepreneurs left Havana, went to Miami, created a whole new city, and really dominated all of the trade in South America. So, Your Honor, Mayor, let's remember the entrepreneur spirit, and we need to start looking at Brownsville and immigrants the same way we looked at immigrants who come from the West and come to New York, or come from the East and come from and go into San Francisco. So the immigrant experience has always built American cities, and this is why New York City will remain dynamic as long as they have the innovation and the entrepreneurship, because it is the entrepreneurs many times that pack up and leave because of oppressive regimes so that they can open up their ideas in America.
Well, that's a great point, John, and I certainly agree that there's a lot of potential in tapping into that for a city like Brownsville. What we were seeing is that Brownsville wasn't necessarily a destination for the 150,000 people we saw. It was more of the front door, and I always took that responsibility very seriously, because I felt that we were the front door to the rest of the country. We needed to ensure that we built a process that was efficient and humane, but we saw all sorts of just amazing dynamic individuals coming through when you take the time to talk to a lot of them. I met some individuals from Venezuela that were petroleum engineers, and they left Venezuela just because there was not opportunity for their skill set, and their wages were terrible, and they were willing to work labor jobs in the U.S. because they get paid more than actually being petroleum engineers in Venezuela. But think about it: how valuable is that skill set to us here in the U.S.? And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that were coming, regardless of what that potential business was. But it's just fascinating when you actually get to meet these individuals and you compare the real stories to the rhetoric, then you see that it's two polar opposite situations.
Well, I'm gonna give you an assignment real fast. Alejandro's book, Latin Journey, and he talked about what happened in Miami. And look, they had physicians working, right? They had engineers working, but they created their own economic enclave. They revitalized a dying city, right? And that dying city became known as the Miami Enclave. I call it the Miami Miracle. And it was done over a span of merely 20 years. And as a result, I can remember when the Cubans started showing up at the University of Florida's football team. So what I'm saying is, if you can have an opportunity for entrepreneurs to start their own enterprises, to create an enclave so that they can do what they need to do to go forward in America. Because in America, we're not restricted by the blocks of things. We can create new things. If you don't like the schools, create a new one. If you don't like the city, create a new one. And that's what makes America great.
So, Mayor, I have a few questions and maybe some advice, insights, having put Brownsville on the map. When we were hired by you guys to help dream up the future, we basically worked on a program that is unfolding with the broadband deployment and everything else that is coming after that. Some 13 initiatives of the digitalization of Brownsville to actually go from a city of 185,000 people to 1 million people in a short period of time, right? People are moving to Texas every day. Businesses are moving to Texas. I think Brownsville has been discovered now. What are your thoughts on this whole challenge of, modernizing cities, the current business model, which is only tax driven? We were, helping you all figure out how to monetize data and do other things and different services. What do you think is the real cornerstone of how do we go from 19th century, 20th century to a 21st century, 22nd century reality? And how do we go about doing that on the leadership side?
Well, I think on the leadership side, there's several things. First and foremost, in my opinion, you have to have the vision. You have to have the mindset. You have to have the understanding of not just the why. I mean, you can't just focus on the end goal. You have to actually focus on the why. What exactly is it that we're doing, and why are we doing it? And there's a lot of people that talk about the you get from point A to point Z, but they're too focused on point Z, talking about point Z without even really knowing how to get there. And I see that a lot. You hear a lot of talk, you hear a lot of plans, you hear a lot of grandiose things that people want to do, but I see that they don't even have the ability to get a lot of things off the ground. So I think you have to have the vision, leadership, understanding of what it is that you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. I really feel that the trends we're going to continue to see is I see that we're going to continue to have to self-sustain. We don't really, if you look at the allocations that you get, especially in education. I was a trustee for 9 years prior to being mayor at a community college. And what I was seeing and the trend that was happening there was the state was allocating less and less money every year to community colleges and universities. So that money was going down, and the college or university had to then find different creative ways to fill those gaps and create that revenue themselves. Sometimes it was through tuition and fee adjustments, but the percentage of a total budget that was provided by the state through allocations was less and less. And I think we see that trend in municipal government as well, where the assistance we get or the assistance we expect and possibly think we're going to get from government, whether that's state or federal, is getting smaller. So we have to find ways to self-sustain while at the same time providing essential services that individuals are paying for, and at the same time trying to hold the tax rate as low as possible to try and leave more money in people's pockets so they can continue to invest that money and try and grow it out on their end. But I think as a city, leadership is the number one most valuable thing you can have when you're trying to get from a city of 185,000 to a city of 1 million. And then from that point, you have to have ethical, responsible leadership as well. Bringing in the right people, identifying the people that are going to be able to do the job. And sometimes that involves taking a risk. Sometimes you have to see the potential individuals and take that risk. And then you have to empower your team. You have to hire the right people and let them do their job, and let them do what it is that they want to do. Obviously, you have to you can't micromanage, but you have to kind of continue to stay on top of the end goal and ensure that we're growing the way we want to grow. But it's a multifaceted job. There's so many pieces to the puzzle. That's why not a whole lot of communities have done this, and it can come off the rails very quickly. You have poor leadership, you have poor management. You're not bringing in the right people. You're not empowering your people. You're not paying your people. You see them leave. So there's all sorts of things in municipal government that differs from the private sector, where in the private sector, you can throw money at it. If you're bringing in enough money and you can actually identify the people you want to bring in, you can actually, throw money at it in a way and solve that problem, which we've seen, let's say, SpaceX versus NASA. The bureaucracy of NASA has held it back when a company like SpaceX, a private company that can raise billions of dollars overnight, can then innovate 10 times quicker at least than a governmental entity because of bureaucracy and other things. But it's certainly, I don't think there's a formula to it, but it all starts with leadership, and then it flows from there. And there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that can set it on the wrong track very quickly.
Yeah, no, well said. Go ahead, Llewellyn.
I have a question. During this discussion, we've talked about Brownsville, the city, but in most parts of the country, the cities are somewhat imploding while the edges are prospering. I saw it most dramatically, of course, in Washington, where the city, District of Columbia, didn't adjust. In 1968, there were riots after Martin Luther King's assassination, and the city has never recovered. It became a destination for the poor, the untrained, the unskilled, and it allowed what was once a first-rate school system to deteriorate. So no one who was ambitious, who had children, wanted to live in DC. They wanted to live in these other counties, which I mentioned earlier. Mostly when we talk about development now, we talk about regions. 128 is not actually Boston, it's outside of Boston, etc. And San Francisco and downtown Los Angeles are both having huge problems of implosion, have become magnets for the poor, the homeless, the hapless. How are you going to save Brownsville from that? And what are the options around Brownsville should it prosper for edge cities?
Well, that's actually an awesome question, Llewellyn. And I read an article that was directly on point to this in the Atlantic about 2 months ago. It was talking about why certain cities have more of a homeless problem than others. And there's trends there, and it all points to cities that bring in huge economic opportunities. For example, Los Angeles, San Francisco, these are cities that have a very vibrant economy in certain areas. For example, San Francisco, obviously technology. So individuals are coming to these cities because, and there's two key words here. One is opportunity and the other is affordability, right? So you have individuals that are coming to these cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Washington, DC, because there's plenty of opportunity and there's plenty of jobs available. However, the jobs that are available, there's the percentage of them that are actually very high paying is smaller compared to the individuals that are coming. So a lot of individuals are filling jobs that are on the lower end of the wage scale, right? So you have people that are coming, let's say, to Los Angeles for whatever job, making maybe $15, $18, $25 an hour, which is a great opportunity for them when they compare it to their small city, let's say in Utah or some other Texas, right? So they have an opportunity to make more money in Los Angeles or San Francisco. They get there, they work that job, and then they confront the second word that I use, which is affordability. And the reality is, because there's so much money and there's so much of an economy in certain areas in these bigger cities, the individuals that are working the $15, $18, $25 an hour jobs can't afford to live there. They're making a good amount of money for where they're from, where the cost of living is entirely different, but they're coming to a city where they're going to get paid more per hour, not realizing how bad the cost of living is and how they truly cannot afford to live in the urban core. Therefore, they move out to the suburbs. I think that's some of the trends you're seeing in this Atlantic article. If you look for it, it does a great job of explaining it. Brownsville doesn't have that problem yet, but I think we need to keep our eyes on the affordability aspect of it. While we're building out the opportunity, creating those opportunities, creating higher paying jobs, we cannot lose focus on the back end and a very critical component, which is the affordability of living in Brownsville or the surrounding areas. As long as we can continue to maintain that affordability, then I think we're going to be okay. But we have the blueprints from all these other cities that haven't been able to solve that issue. And if we can't do it, then there's really no excuse. We know what's happening. We know why it's happening. I don't anticipate there's going to be any issues. But again, I'm not there, so I can't control it myself, but I can only try and whisper in the ears of those who are doing it.
Yeah.
Well, Trey, let me comment on that. Trey, when you have a city, and of course we had that in Austin, and people like to be compassionate, but we had too much compassion. You can't give buildings away for nothing in cities. You cannot tell people that they can have a lot that's vacant and just give it away. You have to maintain the whole idea of buying stuff. And this is why Manhattan in New York, right? It is hard to have a affordable cities when the economy itself is just taking off. So one of the things you do, if you look at cities, you just don't give cities away. And of course, the more you do this, then the more the homeless come to you. So if you maintain some basic principles, right? If you cannot get there, you cannot have the building. So the compassion has to be really, really related to and equalized with the real dynamics of market economies. And when cities, whether it's Chicago, whether it's Detroit, start giving stuff away, then and those things do not blossom. On the other hand, if you look at a city like Atlanta, they never did that. If you look at a city like Miami, they never did that. So cities have gone through different kinds of phases, but you cannot have too much compassion. Compassion is good, but compassion will also create the kind of situations that you have in San Francisco now.
So go ahead.
I think it's called moral hazard.
Well, there was some very, the trends in this article also spoke to the politics of some of these cities as well. So there's definitely some things that are very similar in some of the situations we see: Austin, LA, San Francisco, New York.
Mhm. So Mayor, a quick question for you. Insight is still, in the 50s, after World War II, a big chunk of America was developed by the private enterprises, the oil towns, Mobile, Alabama, all these other places. And China and India and Africa is kind of in that mode today. We seem to, having been already a 230-year democracy, very kind of focus on our current model, local government, this and that. Do you see an evolution of us having to get to 1 billion people to keep our tax base and retirement things and all that math working right over time, that we need to kind of morph our model, how we govern, how we do things? You think there's room for a hybrid model here where private sector has a lot more to say on how things are run?
Well, I mean, that's a really tough question. I'm not sure that even the best Harvard economists know the answer to that. But I think it has to be hybrid. You cannot rely on government to be the solution, especially now that, like I said earlier, I mean, we're having to do less. I mean, we're having to do more with less. And the government is not the solution in providing the outcomes we want to see on economics of our cities. It's going to be driven by the private sector. It's going to be driven. However, I do believe that cities and municipalities play a huge role in this, because if you want to see that innovation and you want to see that capitalization from the private industry, you have to create the environment as a city for these businesses to thrive, which is what I was doing as mayor, kind of providing that infrastructure, providing the base and providing the tool set for these companies to be able to come to Brownsville, develop in Brownsville, grow in Brownsville, provide that opportunity, and then provide the economics that we wanted to see in our city. So by having a broadband infrastructure, by having a new development code that makes it easier and more streamlined to open businesses, by working with our university and community college in the workforce development of industry, kind of seeing where industry is going, by having innovative companies like SpaceX and others coming to Brownsville, you're building that ecosystem, so to speak. But the government plays a huge role in creating that environment, providing the tools for these businesses to want to come here, and then also kind of getting out of the way and letting them grow.
Got it.
Yeah, and I also think let's not forget that it is science and technology that made America great. Whether it's the telegraph, whether it's the automobile, whether it's broadband, whether it's Microsoft, it was the science. So let's not get overrated on how businesses, because the science would take a business out. And if you look at the great cities like New York City in the old days, if you look at what happened and all the stuff that they did, and then if you look at what happened recently in San Francisco and Austin, Texas, it was taking science and technology on new ways of doing things. And it just doesn't have to be computers, right? It could have been a new brick. It could have been a new way of communicating. But business schools, for the most part, take the science and technology and commercialize it. So we will always need innovation. So America has been ahead of everybody, because when I go overseas and I watch people open their computers and it says Microsoft, it makes me feel good. But all of a sudden it says something else, and the technology and science is not leading business. So one of the things I always tell people, so what are you majoring in? Well, go major in engineering, go major in biology, go major in chemistry, right? And then combine that with a business degree, because it is science and technology. And let me add this. In the old days, Duella can testify, a lot of the innovation came out of garages. They came out of private enterprises, but we have created something called a research university. We have tons and tons of money tied up in labs in universities that cannot get out. So it is true that the University of Texas created, if you will, the Austin region. Stanford created Silicon Valley, and MIT created the Boston region. So we got to realize the business is always good, but there's nothing like science and technology that changes business models. So, for example, smart cities is about the science, and then we create a business model under that science. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, John. And maybe I wasn't clear, but when I was talking about infrastructure and that opportunity, I mean, Andres knows this. I don't even, I mean, my number one, I'm looking at innovation. I'm looking at technology. I'm looking at that, that type of field. I mean, obviously others will build around that, but I was always looking to build the innovation aspect of it and allowing entrepreneurship and innovation to thrive in our city. But I needed to provide the tools for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, final thoughts on as we're closing here the hour. I wanted you to share with us perhaps what's in front of you the next 90 days, 160 days. You have graciously agreed to participate and be a panel speaker in our Smart Cities and Communities panel, September 26 in Austin, Texas. Texas State University hosting the program here in San Marcos, South Austin. What else is going on in your life and in your law firm, and what's going on?
Well, getting back to being a lawyer, obviously, and building out that for the last month and a half, trying to get on airplanes a little bit more and travel a little bit here and there when I get a chance. But really, just about being a lawyer, doing some some consulting that comes my way, trying to use my skill set to improve others' business, government as much as possible. Staying involved with the city of Brownsville from the outside, like I said. And really just one day at a time, but it's been a lot more peaceful. It's been fun, and my ideas are churning in my head, so I feel that creative energy burning again, which is good, and it's fun.
So I have a wild idea for you while we say goodbye here. Maybe you should bring MLS team to Brownsville.
Yeah, there was some discussions about some soccer, bringing some soccer down here. That'd be fun. I haven't had a chance to watch the Austin team yet. I've been invited a few times, but just haven't had a chance. But yeah, that'd be great. And I think we have that. I think we have the audience to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Regionally, yeah.
Yeah, gentlemen, any final thoughts?
Well, Mr. Mayor, it was great speaking to you and realizing that the city is still the lifeblood of countries. So congratulations on what you've done in Brownsville.
Thanks, John.
I find it very interesting. I find Brownsville, and I haven't been but looking at it from a distance and reading about it, which I was doing some preparation before our broadcast. And it's a great laboratory for what the future could be. The one issue we have not touched on, but which does affect people's attitudes to cities, is crime. And whether they want to live in the city or live outside of the city, by crime, and it's worth bearing in mind. And I wish you great luck, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the 360, where Johnny and I'll be doing a cage fight, by the way.
Absolutely.
Major attraction.
Yeah, real quick before we go, John, just remind everybody, September 26th, 29th, the coming. The mayor will be there. Can't miss it. Johnny, take us away.
But I heard the news. Everybody's rocking tonight. Wanna hold my baby real tight. You're gonna know I'm a mighty, mighty man, cause I heard the news. Well, we're rocking tonight. Sweet Lord, sweet Chevy Sue. Hey, baby, ain't you glad? Cause I heard the news. We're rocking tonight.
All right.
My blues voice. Okay.
Well done, Johnny.
Thank you.